Imagine a tranquil town, suddenly gripped by horror, as a beloved reptile enthusiast is strangled by her own python. How did this tragedy unfold? Oxford, Indiana, a tranquil, close-knit community where daily existence unfolded without haste, until a horrifying revelation abruptly shattered its calm, inside a specialized facility for reptiles belonging to a dedicated exotic creature. Admirer, the 36-year-old, was discovered lifeless on the ground, constricted firmly around her throat, was a formidable 8-foot, reticulated python, an animal she had nurtured, an animal she adored. What transpired within those walls? How did a cherished companion transform into a lethal hunter? If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the Animal Quest channel. We explore the authentic, compelling narratives behind the planet's most unsettling animal confrontations. Should this kind of material intrigue you long after viewing, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us share more compelling accounts. Was not merely another resident in Oxford, Indiana. To those familiar with her, she was vibrant, deeply passionate, and fiercely committed to creatures. Most people instinctively feared reptiles weren't just a casual interest for her. They were her entire world, had dedicated years to establishing her own private reptile haven where she housed over 24 snakes and various other exotic species, from immense Burmese pythons to boas and lizards. Each animal received meticulous attention. She wasn't simply an enthusiast. She was a respected figure in the local exotic pet community, celebrated for her expertise, composed demeanor, and dedication to reptile well-being. Acquaintances frequently described as someone possessing an extraordinary rapport with these animals, capable of handling a 100-pound python with the same ease others might display walking a dog. She was neither careless nor uninformed. In fact, she often championed ethical ownership and public education. Her online presence mirrored this dedication, showcasing images of her handling massive snakes, cleaning their enclosures, attending reptile conventions, and promoting proper care guidelines. Oxford itself is a modest Midwestern settlement with a population just exceeding 1,000. It's the type of place where neighbors are familiar with one another, and urban news feels far removed. Exotic pets are not common, they're not truly, but was one of the few who challenged the prevailing norms. She resided in a dwelling where the rear section had been repurposed into a complete reptile habitat, outfitted with warming lamps, climate controls, and feeding stations. This arrangement was no secret. Local law enforcement had even previously engaged with in a positive context regarding her animals, and her setup was deemed permissible under Indiana statutes. However, owning exotic pets involves a precarious equilibrium between captivation and peril. There's an undeniable allure to rearing something wild, something untamed. The notion of forging a connection with a creature that could one day overpower you is both exhilarating and profoundly hazardous. While most snake owners maintain that their reptiles are docile and unlikely to strike unless provoked, the reality is that these animals remain predators. Instinct does not consistently recognize affection, and on that warm summer day in 2019, profound affection for her animals collided with the harsh edge of that reality. A bond founded on trust abruptly turned lethal. October 30th, 2019. It was intended to be a routine visit. Just after 8:30 in the evening, Benton County Sheriff's deputies received a call for a welfare check at address, a property she did not inhabit but utilized specifically to house her collection of reptiles. Visiting there daily to attend to the animals, feed them, clean enclosures, and monitor their environments was part of her regular schedule. But on this particular day, his family had not heard from her. She hadn't returned home. She wasn't answering calls. Something felt amiss. Deputies arrived at the house, an unassuming dwelling on the outskirts of town. The front yard was quiet, devoid of any signs of distress. But inside, a different narrative unfolded. What officers encountered would become one of the most unsettling scenes in Indiana's recent memory. His body lay on the floor of the reptile room, unresponsive, motionless, her face pale and lips blue, coiled tightly around her neck. Was one of her snakes, a reticulated python estimated to be over 8 feet long and weighing more than 100 pounds. It was not aggressive, neither hissing nor striking. It remained still, calm, but the damage had already been inflicted. The responding officer urgently radioed in the situation. "We've got a female unconscious. Appears to have been constricted by a large snake. She's not breathing." Paramedics rushed in attempting resuscitation. But it was too late, was pronounced deceased at the scene. Authorities later confirmed that the snake was not indigenous to Indiana. It was one of over 140 reptiles had possessed over time, a collection she managed between her personal residence and the dedicated reptile house she had established. According to officials, the snake was not roaming freely. It had been intentionally removed, likely for cleaning or exercise. Investigators surmise the attack transpired during that process, possibly within mere seconds. Reticulated pythons are ambush predators. They can strike coil and constrict their prey in a single fluid motion. Once they commence squeezing, the pressure can cut off blood flow and restrict breathing within moments. Sheriff Don M. Son, visibly shaken, informed reporters that in all his years of law enforcement, he had never witnessed anything comparable. This woman appears to have been strangled by the snake. She was clearly very experienced, but with reptiles like these, it only takes one wrong move. There were no indications of a struggle elsewhere in the house, no signs of foul play, only the quiet aftermath of a moment that went terribly, fatally awry in those final minutes. It is believed was alone. No one witnessed the strike, no camera captured the moment. It was just her and the creature she had nurtured, since it was small enough to fit in her hands. A pet she had raised, a predator she had trusted. A tragic end no one could have foreseen. The post-mortem examination was completed within 24 hours. The findings were grim but unequivocal. The official cause of demise was asphyxiation due to neck compression, consistent with a constricting force the python had squeezed until could no longer breathe, likely crushing her airway and severing circulation. According to the coroner, the applied pressure was more than sufficient to induce unconsciousness within seconds and death shortly thereafter. There were no defensive wounds, no scrapes or bruises that would indicate a struggle. Never had an opportunity to retaliate. News of her passing disseminated rapidly, not just throughout Oxford, but across the nation. The idea that an experienced reptile handler, someone who had reared and managed large snakes for years, could be killed by one of her own left many posing the same query. How could this occur? Experts in herpetology, the study of reptiles and amphibians, publicly offered their insights. Dr. Stephen R. Goldberg, a specialist in reptile behavior, clarified that although such attacks are exceedingly rare, they are not impossible. Reticulated pythons are renowned for their immense power, their unpredictable reactions to stimuli, and their sheer size in captivity. A snake may associate movement or thermal signatures with feeding. One misinterpreted cue, one mishandled routine and instinct, can take over. Another herpetologist echoed that sentiment, noting that while captive snakes can develop behavioral patterns with handlers, they do not form bonds in the manner dogs or cats might. There is no affection, no loyalty. The relationship is transactional. Functional to the snake, everything revolves around survival, territory, and opportunity. Reticulated pythons, native to Southeast Asia, rank among the largest snakes globally in their natural habitat. They prey on monkeys, pigs, and even deer. Though they are non-venomous, their lethal capacity lies in constriction, a method that, when applied to a human, can be just as deadly as any neurotoxin. Legally, ownership of the snake did not constitute a violation in Indiana. There are minimal restrictions on keeping exotic animals, like large constrictors. At the time of her death, owned approximately 20 snakes at that particular location, a property that had been authorized as a reptile dwelling, and sanctuary authorities confirmed that there was no evidence of animal mistreatment, neglect, or illicit activities. Despite the tragic outcome, no criminal charges were filed. The snake was not euthanized. It was transferred to the care of animal control and subsequently placed with another licensed reptile handler. However, the incident reignited a fervent discussion in local and national discourse. Should private ownership of potentially lethal exotic animals be subjected to more stringent regulation? Some argued that what befell was a freak accident, a one-in-a-million tragedy that should not be used to penalize responsible owners. Others insisted that regardless of experience, Housing such powerful creatures in residential neighborhoods presented an unnecessary hazard both to the owner and to the public. In the ensuing days, lawmakers received petitions animal rights organizations called for reform, and throughout reptile communities, a subtle apprehension crept in. The kind that makes even the most seasoned handler view their animals a little differently, because no matter how much you trust them, some instincts never fade. The snake involved in death was a reticulated python, Malayapython reticulatus, a species recognized for its immense dimensions, formidable strength, and distinctive markings, indigenous to Southeast Asia. These serpents are the longest in the world, with some individuals reaching over 20 feet in length. The python in scare measured approximately 8 feet, far from a record breaker, yet still powerful enough to extinguish a human life. Reticulated pythons are non-venomous constrictors. Their hunting strategy relies on stealth, swiftness, and immense physical force. They detect heat signatures from warm-blooded creatures, strike rapidly, and coil around their prey with astonishing power. Each time the prey exhales, the snake tightens its hold, progressively cutting off air and blood flow. Death results from asphyxiation or cardiac arrest in the wild. Their diet comprises birds, rodents, primates, and even small deer. In captivity, they are typically fed rabbits, rats, or poultry, depending on their size and feeding schedule. Despite their intimidating reputation, attacks on humans are exceedingly uncommon. Most captive pythons live their entire lives without causing harm to a single person. However, these are apex predators, and even in regulated environments, their innate instincts do not vanish. In fact, captivity can sometimes amplify unpredictable behavior. A snake accustomed to a feeding schedule may misinterpret movement or scent as a cue for food. A missed signal, a hand positioned too closely, or sudden motion can trigger a reflex that becomes unstoppable once initiated. Experts caution that no degree of familiarity or routine can override millions of years of evolutionary programming. Unlike domesticated animals, snakes do not form bonds with humans. They do not recognize faces, voices, or gestures of affection. Their behaviors are governed by environmental cues and survival instincts, nothing more. And was not the first to encounter the lethal potential of a large python. In 2013, 2 young boys in New Brunswick, Canada, were killed by an African rock python that escaped its enclosure and attacked them while they slept. In Indonesia, at least 2 adults have been swallowed whole by wild reticulated pythons. Recent years incidents that shocked the world and served as a stark reminder of these snakes' capabilities. In Florida, where invasive Burmese pythons now flourish in the wild due to the exotic pet trade, there have been several near-fatal encounters with handlers. While these events are rare, they form a discernible pattern, one that emphasizes the razor-thin margin between fascination and fatality. With snakes of this magnitude and power, a single error is often one too many, and in this instance it wasn't solely the python's size that mattered most. It was the moment. A solitary lapse, a silent transition from tranquility to turmoil, and the irreversible outcome. Death sparked a national discourse, one as intricate as it is contentious. Who bears accountability when an exotic animal turns deadly? Is it a grievous accident or a failure of oversight? For those who possess exotic animals, the relationship is founded on passion, expertise, and trust. Owners often perceive their animals as companions, not threats. They spend years studying, nurturing, and establishing routines with their pets, but with that passion comes an immense obligation, not only to the animals themselves, but to the individuals around them, because the truth is, when you opt to keep a creature capable of killing you, the risk does not conclude at your doorstep. Exotic pet ownership in the United States is a legal mosaic with varying regulations across different states, and in some instances, none at all. In Indiana, where resided, there are comparatively few restrictions on maintaining large constrictor snakes. No special permit is required to own a reticulated python. There are no regular inspections, no mandated safety protocols. This absence of uniform regulation creates loophole situations where fatal errors can occur without warning, and often without legal repercussions. Critics contend that these gaps pose a threat not only to owners, But to entire communities, what happens if a python escapes into a neighborhood? What if a child wanders into the wrong room or an untrained visitor mishandles an animal? The potential for harm extends far beyond the owner's residence. But others champion the right to own exotic animals as a matter of personal liberty. They highlight the majority of conscientious keepers, those who uphold rigorous safety standards and who go years, even decades, without a single incident. For them, tighter regulations feel like a penalty for the missteps of a few. They argue that dogs, far more prevalent household pets, injure or kill more people annually than all exotic animals combined. So why single out snakes? Still's case serves as a stark admonition. All it takes is one misstep, one moment of vulnerability, one misinterpreted signal, and the consequence can be ruinous. Lawmakers in Indiana have yet to introduce new legislation in direct response to her death, but animal welfare organizations and public safety advocates continue to press for change, advocating for stricter registration, laws, compulsory training, and emergency preparedness requirements for exotic pet owners. Because while freedom is vital, so is safety, and in the quiet space between those two ideals, lives can be extinguished. There is something inherently human about the yearning to connect with the wild, to subdue it, to coexist with creatures that evoke both reverence and dread. For exotic pet owners, like that connection runs far deeper than mere fascination. It becomes integral to identity, a relationship built on routine, deference, and reliance. Psychologists refer to this as anthropomorphism, the propensity to ascribe human traits to animals. Over time, owners may come to believe that their pets recognize them, acknowledge them, even reciprocate affection. And while animals like canines and felines have co-evolved with humans to reciprocate that bond, snakes have not reticulated. Pythons do not bond in the way mammals do. They do not experience loyalty. Their behaviors are instinctive, not emotional. Yet for many keepers, the daily handling, the years of dedicated care, the absence of any prior incident can foster a potent delusion. The conviction that the animal has grown accustomed to them, that it knows not to harm them. That illusion can be comforting and perilously misleading. Psychologists suggest that risk perception among exotic animal owners can become distorted over time. The more familiar the routine, the less menacing it feels. The snake is fed regularly. It has not struck before. It is calm in your presence. And gradually, the boundary between caution and complacency begins to dissolve. Was highly experienced by all accounts. She understood how to manage her reptiles with diligence and discipline, but even the most seasoned handler can underestimate the subtle variables. Hunger, environmental stress, a misread movement, and when your life revolves around these animals, the possibility of danger can become easy to minimize, even disregard. There's also a psychological element of control. Possessing a predator, especially one that others fear, can generate a sense of empowerment. It can become a means to distinguish oneself, to feel a unique connection to nature, to demonstrate mastery over something powerful. But control in these relationships is invariably conditional. And when that illusion shatters, the repercussions can be irreversible. The news of death sent shockwaves through the small town of Oxford, Indiana. A place renowned for its quiet streets and tight-knit community was suddenly thrust into the national spotlight for all the wrong reasons. But beyond the headlines and expert analyses, there was grief, raw, immediate, and profoundly personal. Within hours of the official announcement, neighbors began placing candles and flowers along the fence line of the Reptile house she maintained. By nightfall, a small vigil had formed. Friends, family, and strangers gathered in silence, many still in disbelief. They remembered, not as a headline, but as a daughter, a friend, a woman whose passion for animals had defined her life and identity. Public statements from family members followed shortly thereafter. One relative, speaking through tears, described as fearless and gentle, someone who never encountered an animal she couldn't soothe or tend to. They acknowledged the inherent danger of her chosen path, but insisted that her motivations had always been driven by affection, not recklessness. Social media erupted with condolences. Reptile owners from across the country shared photos and messages in her honor. Some posted videos recalling her kindness at exotic pet expos and online forums Others shared warning shard lessons learned. From near misses in hopes that her story might avert another tragedy in the subsequent weeks, small initiatives began to materialize. A local animal education group launched a campaign, in its name advocating for safety training and awareness for exotic pet owners. They commenced offering free seminars, distributing materials on emergency protocols, and lobbying for statewide enhancements in exotic animal policy. Their message was unequivocal. If with all her experience could fall victim to this kind of tragedy, no one was immune. Her death became more than just an event. It became a catalyst igniting discussions, reshaping perspectives, and reminding everyone of the delicate boundary between devotion and peril. Tragic passing was not merely an isolated incident. It was a cautionary narrative, a reminder that even those with extensive experience can succumb to the very creatures they trust most. One of the clearest takeaways is this: exotic animals, regardless of how familiar they become, are not domesticated companions. They do not operate on affection or loyalty. Their instincts are ancient, their power undeniable, and their behavior unpredictable under adverse conditions. Experts emphasize the criticality of stringent handling protocols. Always feed snakes in a separate enclosure to prevent associating human presence with food. Utilize tools, not hands, to manage large snakes. Whenever feasible, never work alone, especially with species known for constriction. Ensure a second person is nearby who is trained and capable of intervening in an emergency. Housing considerations are also paramount. Enclosures must be secure, escape-proof, and distinctly labeled. Emergency implements, like snake hooks, cutting shears, and bite kits, should always be within easy reach. A written emergency plan should be shared with family or roommates, just in case. From a regulatory viewpoint, the incident highlights the necessity for consistent standards, not to punish responsible owners, but to safeguard them. Education, certification, and routine safety checks can prove to be the difference between life and death, and for the broader public, story serves as a potent wake-up call. Fascination must be tempered with responsibility. Passion must be guided by precaution, because in the realm of exotic animal ownership, there is no margin for error and no time for denial. Story is not solely about tragedy. It encompasses trust, risk, and the slender division between wonder and danger. It reminds us that nature, however controlled it may appear, is never truly domesticated, and that behind every exotic animal kept in captivity lies a responsibility that must never be treated lightly. Her death was heart-wrenching, but if her story instigates one more safety check, one more conversation, or one legislative change that saves a life, then her legacy will hold significance far beyond that quiet Indiana town. What are your thoughts on exotic pet ownership? Should regulations be stricter? Do you believe the advantages outweigh the hazards? We'd like to hear from you. Share your perspectives in the comments section below. If you found this story compelling or insightful, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more authentic wildlife encounters, and share this video to help raise awareness about the genuine dangers of exotic pets. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and respect the wild. What are your thoughts on exotic pet ownership? Share your views in the comments below.